Raindrops tapped against the black umbrella fabric as Thomas stood before freshly turned earth. The document pouch in his suit pocket dug painfully into his ribs. The pastor had just finished the final prayer, and Thomas mechanically took the shovel, scooping a shovelful of dirt to sprinkle over his father's oak coffin. "My condolences," said Cousin Mark, clapping him on the shoulder. His lawyer's badge glinted faintly at the collar of his raincoat. "Notary's office at 3 this afternoon." When Lena took the shovel with her gloved hand, Thomas caught the scent of antiseptic wafting from her hair. The marks left by her surgery last week were like the unopened blood pressure pills in his father's desk drawer. "Mr. Carl's will," the notary said, sliding over a leather pouch. The embossed seal still carried the residual warmth from the printer. Thomas stared at the ink stain on the third page. The blurred blue splotch covered exactly the words "illegitimate child." "Isn't something missing here?" He paused his index finger over the blank space on the asset distribution form. When Mark leaned in, the smell of cologne mixed with peppermint hit Thomas's face. "It's just the standard format," Mark said, his fountain pen tracing a wavy line under the character etc. "The detailed list should be in the supplementary clause." Lena suddenly coughed. She was flipping through the yellowed photographs tucked in the will's appendix. Thomas watched her thumb press the edge of a group photo. Beside his father stood a woman wearing an unfamiliar malachite brooch. "Let's go home first," Mark said, closing the folder so quickly the paper let out a sharp tear. In the curtain of rain, Thomas counted the swipes of the windshield wipers. Lena's breathing was 3 times lighter than usual in the apartment elevator. Lena spoke up suddenly. "Do you remember Dad's Mont Blanc fountain pen?" She pointed to the smudged ink at the will's signature. "This blue-black ink. It's the one from his collection," Thomas replied, sliding his key along the seal of the document pouch, then froze. The notarization date on the last page of the will was November 2022, yet the calendar in his father's study was forever frozen on January 17th, 2023, the day of his first heart attack. That Mark's call came at midnight. "Do you remember Sophia Weiss?" From Munich University, Thomas stared at the photo of the paper's author on his computer screen. The green eyes of the biology doctor matched exactly the inscription on the title page of Butterflies along the Rhine in his father's bookcase. "Meet me at the law firm at 10 tomorrow," Mark added before hanging up. "Don't tell Lena." As the sound of running water came from the bathroom, Thomas noticed binding holes on the 7th page of the will. He counted the page numbers. The missing 8th page might hold 3 names or 30 years of lies. Outside the window, the red signal light of the Berlin TV tower cut through the rain, like the flickering dots on an EKG monitor. Lena used her fingertip to lift a silk scarf stuck in the closet crevice. The lavender chiffon glowed with the luster of mother-of-pearl in the morning light. Her fingers, soaked in antiseptic, were unusually sensitive to scents. She frowned. It wasn't the sandalwood Carl usually wore, but an unfamiliar perfume with a base note of white musk. "What are you looking at?" Thomas's voice came from the bathroom. The hum of his electric shaver sounded like a swarm of bees flying in the distance. "One of your dad's old scarves," she said, folding it twice and tucking it under a medical record. "Such nice fabric." The faucet shut off abruptly. Thomas appeared in the doorway, shaving foam still on his chin. Dad never used scarves. He thought they choked him. His gaze fell on Lena's reddened ear tips. "What's wrong?" Lena adjusted her collar to hide the tremor in her fingers. Must have been left by one of his female colleagues. She deliberately let the medical records slip to the floor, and X-ray films spilled out of the folder. Thomas bent to pick them up. The smell of aftershave on the back of his neck stung Lena's eyes. It was the same concentration as the formaldehyde used in the anatomy lab last week. Images of pale, soaked organs floating in the solution flashed before her. "Got a hospital appointment today." Thomas tucked the X-rays back into the folder, his thumb pausing for a second on the patient's name. "Consultation at 10, Lena said quickly, closing the folder. A corner of the scarf peeked out from under the medical record, like a purple tongue. In the descending elevator, Thomas suddenly said, "Mark asked me to talk about the will at noon." He stared at the floor numbers. "Do you want to come?" The LCD screen showed B2 before Lena answered. The obstetrics director wants to discuss the twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, TTS, treatment plan. She touched her flat belly. I'll make Hungarian goulash tonight. The motion sensor lights in the underground garage turned on one after another. As Thomas started the car, Lena noticed the glove compartment was slightly ajar, half a jewelry appraisal certificate peeked out. The photo of the malachite brooch Carl had collected suddenly popped into her mind. The antiseptic smell in the hospital corridor was sharper than usual. As Lena tucked the scarf into an evidence bag and in turn hurried over, Dr. Weiss is waiting for your pathology report. Which Dr. Weiss? Lena's hand froze on the doorknob. The visiting scholar from Munich University, the intern said, flipping through the schedule. Dr. Sophia Weiss at 11. The mirror in the changing room reflected Lena's pale lips. She pulled out her phone to search for the name. On Sophia's academic profile, the green-eyed woman wore malachite earrings. Her screen suddenly lit up with a message from Thomas. Mark says Sophia is mentally unstable and has a history of delusions. The scarf glowed eerily in the evidence bag. Lena thought of the abortion specimen she'd handled last week. The fetal tissue preserved in formaldehyde had the same lavender hue. She suddenly tore open the evidence bag and sniffed. Beneath the white musk was a faint hint of ylang ylang. She'd studied this perfume formula in her medical school thesis. It was a cheap fragrance popular in East Germany in the 1990s. Lena's fingertips went cold. In the old photo from Carl's study, the woman with the malachite brooch stood in front of the Berlin Wall ruins. Dr. Weiss is here. A nurse's knock made her nearly drop her phone. At the end of the corridor, the green-eyed woman was flipping through a magazine in the waiting room. The malachite bracelet on her wrist glinted with dark green light in the sun. Lena counted her heartbeat as she walked toward the consultation room. The scarf in her pocket felt like a red-hot coal. When Sophia looked up, Lena smelled the ylang ylang mixed with white musk, the same scent as the handkerchief in Mark's suit pocket. Sophia's fingertips tapped gently on the magazine, and her malachite bracelet made a clear, clinking sound. Lena noticed a faint ring mark on her left ring finger. Her nails were trimmed unusually neatly, as if she often handled precision instruments. Dr. Weiss? Lena tucked the evidence bag into her lab coat pocket, the antiseptic smell masking the ylang ylang. The green-eyed woman closed the magazine and stood up. Lena saw a thin scar on the skin behind her ear, exactly where the little girl in Carl's study photo had gotten hurt in a fall. Just call me Sophia. Her voice was hoarser than on the phone. Didn't expect to meet like this, Dr. Schneider. The moment the consultation room door closed, Sophia pulled a leather notebook from her briefcase. Lena saw the gilded date on the title page, November 9th, 1991, the second anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. My mother's journal, Sophia said, opening it to reveal yellowed pages stained with dark brown spots. Your father-in-law gave her that malachite brooch at Checkpoint Charlie that day. Lena's stethoscope slipped to the floor. Sophia suddenly grabbed her wrist. You smelled it, didn't you? Mark uses the same perfume. Her nails dug into Lena's skin. My mother made it. Ylang ylang essence from one of East Germany's last state-run factories. The intern's voice calling Lena came from the corridor. Sophia quickly slipped a note into her pocket. Tell Thomas to meet me at Zoologischer Garden Station at 8 tonight. Your father-in-law amended his will a week before he died. Lena felt stickiness on the back of the note. When she pulled it out, she found a faded ultrasound photo. The 1992 imaging was blurry, but the fetal outline was clear. At the bottom were the words, Gift from Carl Schneider, written in fountain pen. You have another brother. Sophia's green eyes glistened with tears. But in the welfare home records, he's called Marcus Becker. She suddenly pulled down her collar. There was a birthmark below her collarbone, identical in shape to Thomas's. The intern knocked again. Sophia whispered one last thing. Mark has a copy of Butterflies Along the Rhine on the third shelf of his bookcase. Open it to page 88. Her perfume suddenly turned sharp. Your husband's aftershave has a unique scent, just like Carl's. Lena's fountain pen scratched a long streak across the prescription pad. After Sophia left, she noticed the back of the ultrasound photo had the welfare home address written in pencil dated Christmas Eve 1993. That was the day Carl had taken Thomas skiing. In the photo, the 7-year-old boy wore the same dark blue sweater Mark wore now. Her phone vibrated. Thomas had sent a location, a cafe near Mark's law firm. The additional message made Lena bite her lip until it bled. He says Sophie is delusional and has a history of mental illness. The UV light tube in the consultation room hummed. Lena spread the scarf under the light. The faint letters DDR, Deutsche Demokratische Republik, East Germany, were visible. It was the logo of an East German textile factory. She suddenly remembered Carl always saying, after reunification, even the air in West Berlin tasted sweet. Yet he'd hidden that old scar for 30 years. The afternoon downpour came suddenly. Lena stood by the window in the pathology department, watching interns run for cover. In her phone's photo album, Mark's posture while cutting cake at his birthday party last year was identical to Carl's. Dr. Schneider? The pathology director poked his head in. The genetic comparison report just faxed over from Munich University. He handed her a folder. Your father-in-law's sample, and Lena snatched the folder before he finished. The conclusion on the last page stated a 99.98% paternity probability, but the matched individual's name was blacked out with ink. She noticed half a fingerprint on the edge of the report, stained with crumbs from the peppermint candy Mark always ate. Raindrops hammered against the window panes like the beep of a heart monitor. Lena touched her belly, remembering the 2 flickering dots on the ultrasound screen that morning. Thomas had insisted on using the names Carl had chosen. If they were boys, one would be named Marcus. In the cafe, Thomas stared at the 3rd button of Mark's suit. Sunlight made it glow with the unique dark veins of malachite, exactly the same material as the brooch his father had collected. Let me handle Sophia, Mark said, his coffee spoon clinking harshly against the cup. Her mother died of a drug overdose. She's got a vengeful streak. A half-hidden scar peeked out from his cuff, in the exact spot where Thomas had gotten a childhood burn. Thomas suddenly grabbed his wrist. Why are you the only one with the key to Dad's study? He smelled the ylang wafting from Mark's collar. You went to the old house's basement last week. Mark's pupils contracted sharply. When the waiter came over to refill their cups, he pulled his hand back quickly. Coffee spilled onto the will copy. The shape of the spreading ink was unmistakably 3 side-by-side baby footprints. Thomas stared at the baby footprints in the coffee, tapping his finger on the will copy in the same rhythm Sophia had used. That coffee stain really picked a spot, he said, forcing a joke to hide the tremor in his voice. Mark pulled out a silk handkerchief to wipe the document. The scent of ylang mixed with peppermint drifted over. Don't be paranoid, he said. The corner of his handkerchief was embroidered with DDR. This is all old news, old news. Thomas suddenly pressed his wrist. You transferred 50,000 euros to the genetic lab at Munich University last week. He felt Mark's pulse accelerate sharply. The memo said, sample comparison fee, didn't it? Mark's Adam's apple bobbed. The waiter returned to clean up the spilled coffee, and Mark took the chance to pull his hand away. His cufflink tore the 7th page of the will. Client confidentiality, he said, adjusting his tie too tightly. You didn't hack my computer, did you? Thomas slid his phone to the center of the table. The screen showed a screenshot of the bank transfer. The payee's name was half obscured by Mark's coffee cup, revealing only Sophia Way. The accountant found it while checking inheritance taxes last night, he said, staring at Mark's blue-tinged knuckles. That same account also received malachite auction proceeds last year. An ambulance siren wailed past the window. Mark's fountain pen suddenly rolled to the floor. When he bent to pick it up, Thomas saw a brown birthmark on the back of his neck, identical to the one his father had shown while bathing. It was a consignment transaction, Mark said, his collar soaked with sweat. The malachite jewelry left by Sophia's mother. His voice trailed off as Thomas opened the 9th page of the will, pointing to the fingerprint next to the notary's embossed seal. You have a rare double-loop fingerprint pattern, Thomas set his coffee cup down hard. Just like Dad's. The glass vibrated. He remembered how people had always praised Mark as a kid. You really are a Schneider through and through. Mark's laptop suddenly pinged with a notification. When the screen lit up, Thomas saw Sophia's profile picture in the chat window. She sent me the genetic report 10 minutes ago, he said, slowing his words. Guess what she called you? Dear brother. Raindrops began tapping the glass window. Mark closed his laptop with a violent motion. Thomas noticed his lock screen password was 199-11109. The second anniversary of the Berlin Wall's fall. Listen, Mark said, loosening his tie. A burn scar below his collarbone was visible. I'm trying to protect you both from losing the inheritance. His fountain pen poked holes in the napkin. If the court finds out Carl had 4 illegitimate children. Thomas stood up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. A woman at the next table jumped, knocking over the sugar bowl. 4. He grabbed Mark's tie. The welfare home records only mention 3. Mark's breath, still smelling of childhood peppermint, hit his face. Christmas Eve, 1993, he said hoarsely. The boy Carl picked up from the welfare home is sitting right in front of you. The cafe lights suddenly turned pale. Thomas remembered the day he was 7. His father had suddenly brought distant cousin Mark home, saying, "This poor boy has no parents left." In his memories, Mark had always worn his old sweaters, the cuffs always too long. So that psychiatric report you gave me last week. Thomas let go of his tie, realizing his hands were shaking. Was Sophia's mother's, Mark said, rubbing his red neck. She really was delusional, but the journal is real. His phone lit up again. This time, the caller ID read law firm partner. Now do you understand why the 7th page of the will went missing? The rain grew denser. Thomas watched Mark answer the call, his frown identical to the one his father used when taking board meetings. When the screen lit up again, the full bank transfer page appeared, showing the payee as joint account of Sophia Weiss and Marcus Becker. The day you advised me to give up the house inheritance, Thomas said suddenly. That's the same day you transferred money to that account. He remembered Mark's words back then. It's for tax optimization. His nails dug into his palm. Mark hung up the call, his lips twitching. I was there the night Carl amended his will, he said, opening his phone's photo album. He wanted to leave his malachite collection to the photo finished loading just as Thomas's phone rang. Lena's text included an attachment of the prenatal check report. TTS risk is elevated. Amniocentesis tomorrow morning. At the end was the address Sophia had written on the note, Zoologischer Garten Station. Mark glimpsed the screen and suddenly grabbed his wrist. Don't meet Sophia. She's got more than just the journal. His nails dug into Thomas's skin. She has the confession video Carl recorded on his deathbed. The cafe's glass door blew open in a gust of wind, sending rain slanting inside. Thomas stared at the corner of the ultrasound photo, peeking out of Mark's suit pocket. The 1993 image overlapped with the prenatal scan he'd seen that morning. As the waiter closed the door, he made out the name of the encrypted folder on Mark's laptop desktop. Butterflies along the Rhine. Page 88. The air conditioner hummed in the courtroom. Lena's knuckles were white as she gripped the evidence bag. Sophia stood on the witness stand, opening her journal. Her malachite bracelet refracted dark green light spots under the spotlight. December 24th, 1991. Carl said he would divorce. Sophia's voice cut through the air like a scalpel. When he put the brooch on my mother, Christmas fireworks were exploding in West Berlin. Mark suddenly coughed, pulling out his handkerchief. The scent of ylang-ylang mixed with white musk made Lena's stomach heave. It was identical to the scarf in her pocket. That handkerchief is quite special, Lena said softly, watching Mark's back stiffen. Chiffon from an East German textile mill, isn't it? The tap of the judge's gavel drowned out Mark's sharp inhale. Sophia continued. March 1992. Carl signed a fake name on the welfare home documents. She held up a yellowed paper. Marcus Becker's birth certificate has his fingerprint. Thomas's hands tightened on the armrests of his chair. He noticed the faint fountain pen mark on the bottom right of the document. Its cursive was identical to Mark's signature. Objection. Mark's lawyer's badge wobbled at his collar. These personal diaries are irrelevant to the will probate. Cold light glinted in Sophia's green eyes. Page 88 describes how Carl transferred assets. She suddenly looked toward the audience. like the Swiss bank accounts opened under the names of his illegitimate children. Lena felt Mark's muscles tense beside her. The corner of the ultrasound photo in his suit pocket peeked out, its edge stained with Carl's usual Mont Blanc ink. "Read this part." Sophia flipped to the middle of the journal. Carl admitted to forging Marcus's adoption papers. Her fingertip tapped the words. The identity of cousin would arouse less suspicion. The air conditioner suddenly shut off. Thomas watched cold sweat ooze from Mark's temples, sliding down the same vein that had bulged on his father's forehead when he was anxious. "You knew," Thomas said, his voice hoarse. "That psychiatric report you gave me last week." Mark's fountain pen rolled to the floor. When he bent to pick it up, Lena saw surgical suture marks around the birthmark on the back of his neck, matching the scar left by Carl's car accident exactly. "May 1994 entry." Sophia raised her voice. "Carl bribed the welfare home director with his malachite collection." She held up a photo. The boy in it wore Thomas's childhood dark blue sweater. Murmurs erupted in the audience. Lena touched the embroidered DDR on Mark's handkerchief, suddenly remembering the intern's words about the blacked-out name on the genetic report. The judge called for a 10-minute recess. The way Mark loosened his tie was identical to his father's habitual gesture when anxious. Even the rhythm of his thumb rubbing his watch strap was the same. "Bathroom," Mark said, standing up and knocking over his document pouch. Lena watched a bank statement flutter out. Dated December 24th, 1993, it showed a transfer to the welfare home. Amount precise to 2 decimal places. Sophia came over to hand him a tissue. The malachite on her wrist brushed Lena's hand. "You smelled it, didn't you?" she whispered. Mark reapplies perfume 3 times a day. Inherited Carl's body odor deficiency. Thomas stared toward the bathroom. He remembered the night he was 7. Mark had shown up in his old pajamas, and the study light had stayed on until dawn, the shredder humming nonstop. "Page 88 has something even more interesting," Sophia said, raising her voice. Carl admitted to tampering with the will's ink. The gavel's tap cut her off. As the judge announced the hearing would resume, Lena noticed slight wear on the elbows of Mark's suit, exactly the same as the wear on Carl's old coat. "Please read the last paragraph," the judge said, nodding at the journal. Sophia's green eyes glistened. "I can never publicly acknowledge Marcus, but Swiss account 1189 will secure his future." The court clerk's keyboard suddenly fell silent. Thomas watched Mark's pupils contract sharply, the instinctive reaction of someone hearing their own Swiss account number. "Liar!" Mark's shout made the windows hum. He tore open his shirt collar, revealing the burn scar on his collarbone. "This woman forged." Lena held up the evidence bag. "Shall we test the DNA on the scarf?" She stared straight at Mark's twitching eye corner. "Or the ultrasound photo in your suit pocket?" The audience erupted in discussion. Sophia suddenly turned on a voice recorder. Carl's weak voice filled the courtroom. "Amend the will. Marcus deserves." Mark collapsed into his seat as if a spine had been removed. Thomas watched his trembling fingers, pale and swollen, just like his father's fingers that had tried to press the call button on his deathbed. "Recess." The judge banged the gavel hard. In the chaos, Lena picked up the business card Mark had dropped. Written on the back in faded ink were the words, "From Marcus, Merry Christmas 1993. As Sophia gathered her papers, a group photo from the welfare home slipped out. In it, a woman wearing a malachite necklace held a baby. The calendar on the background wall read November 9th, 1991. Thomas suddenly grabbed Lena's hand. Her palm held the same sweaty warmth as Mark's, the same sticky sensation of the ultrasound probe sliding over her belly during prenatal checks. "Let's go home." His voice sounded as if it came from far away. Lena touched her belly, remembering the 2 overlapping heart rate waves on the fetal movement monitor that morning. The emergency lights in the courthouse hallway cast a cobweb-like shadow over Mark's face as he cleaned his glasses. The login screen for the Swiss bank app reflected on his lenses. The account balance matched exactly the figure stated in the will that he suddenly paused in cleaning his glasses. "You knew," Thomas said, his voice like broken glass. "Since when?" "When you showed up in my old pajamas when we were 7. Mark's Adam's apple bobbed twice, his finger hovering over the phone's lock button. The day the welfare home's archives burned down, his voice sounded strange. Carl came to pick me up, and his suit reeked of gasoline. Lena's nails dug into her palm. She smelled the ylang wafting from Mark's collar, the same scent on the back of the ultrasound photo. Christmas Eve, 1993, she stared at his twitching eye corner. The transfer you made to the welfare home was precise to 2 decimal places. The court's public address system suddenly crackled with static. Mark slipped his phone back into his pocket. It was compensation, he said, his leather shoes scraping harshly against the floor. For the other children. Thomas grabbed his wrist. Mark's pulse thudded wildly under his fingertips. Why does Sophia have your Swiss account number? He pried open Mark's fingers, revealing calluses in the exact spot where one holds a fountain pen for years. Just like his father's, Mark's breathing suddenly grew rapid. Her mother stole Carl's documents, he said. Just like she stole those malachite pieces, liar. Lena held up the evidence bag. The scarf glowed purple in the red light. There are skin flakes on this. 99.98% match to the sample from the comb in Carl's study. The bailiff at the end of the hallway turned to look. Mark suddenly lowered his voice. Do you really think Sophia wants justice? His pupils shrank to pinpricks. Her mother owed $6 million in gambling debts before she died. Thomas thought of the cold light flickering in Sophia's green eyes. He felt the ultrasound photo in his pocket, the 1993 image stained with Carl's usual blue-black ink. You transferred the money, he stared at Mark's blue-tinged knuckles. 50,000 euros for genetic testing. The air vent hummed. Mark's tie clip suddenly snapped open, malachite shards splattering onto Thomas's shoe tips. I was there the night he amended the will, Mark said, his voice like rusted gears. He said, Marcus deserves to know the truth. A sudden cramp seized Lena's stomach. She thought of the blacked-out name on the genetic report and the photo on page 88 of butterflies along the Rhine. You had the paternity test done, she said, holding her aching belly. After his first heart attack, the bailiff's footsteps approached. Mark grabbed Thomas's shoulders, his breath reeking of peppermint. Sophia has more than just the journal. She has the recording of Carl admitting to forging the adoption papers on his deathbed. His nails dug into the suit fabric. What she wants is control of the Schneider Group. Thomas stared at the bulging vein on Mark's temple, identical to his father's when agitated. He remembered the night he was 7. Carl had carried a soaking wet Mark into the living room, while the shredder in the study hummed like it was dying. The welfare home fire wasn't an accident, Lena said. She felt the hard object in Mark's suit in her pocket, the ultrasound photo crinkling under her fingertips. You burned your own birth certificate. Mark's glasses chain suddenly snapped. As the lenses hit the floor, Thomas saw a brown ring around the edge of his iris, identical to the one in the photo from Carl's funeral. Why didn't you say this earlier? Thomas's voice sounded like sandpaper. Carl promised. Mark's cufflink tore the lining of his pocket, and a Swiss bank statement fluttered to the floor. When I turned 30, his phone suddenly vibrated. Sophia's text lit up the screen, a surprise under the butterfly specimen. Lena froze mid-bend while picking up the bank statement. On the transfer record dated November 9th, 1991, a fountain pen-drawn baby footprint was visible, overlapping with the outline on the ultrasound screen that morning. The bailiff's walkie-talkie crackled with static. Mark pressed Thomas's hand to his own chest. An irregular tremor pulsed through his shirt. She's pregnant. He stared at Lena's pale face. Twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. The world suddenly tilted for Thomas. He remembered Mark's unusual questions about the prenatal check that morning, just like the tense jawline Carl had worn when he learned Lena was pregnant. The hearing's resuming, the bailiff said, pushing open the security door. Mark shoved a key into Thomas's hand, still sticky with Carl's signature sealing wax. The old house's basement, he said, his breath tasting of blood. The real will is hidden in the shredder. The hallway lights suddenly flipped on. Lena saw suture marks on the back of Mark's neck, matching the wound description in Carl's autopsy report exactly. Her phone vibrated. Sophia had sent a photo of a 1991 welfare home registration form. Under her father's occupation was written banker, the ink identical to Carl's signature sample. The emergency lights cast a web of shadows across Thomas's vision. He clutched the key Mark had given him, the sticky residue of sealing wax on his palm. The old house's basement. Lena's voice sounded far away. "Should we go now?" Thomas stared at the red crumbs in the key's teeth, the color of Carl's special sealing wax. "The hearing isn't over yet," he said, touching the smudged pencil note from Sophia in his pocket. Lena suddenly grabbed his wrist. "Look at this." She opened the hidden compartment of her medical bag, revealing an ultrasound photo from 1993. The fetal heart rate on this morning's scan is exactly the same. Thomas's voice caught in his throat. Below the welfare home address on the back, written in fountain pen, were the words twin-to-twin transfusion risk monitoring. The handwriting identical to the one in Carl's study medical record that Mark's footsteps echoed from the safety exit. His tie hung askew, and he clutched a torn copy of the will. "Sophia's submitted new evidence," he said, his breath brushing against Thomas's neck, still carrying the metallic tang of blood. "What evidence?" Lena's nails dug into the leather of her medical bag. She smelled the ylang-ylang wafting from Mark's cuff, the same scent as on the ultrasound photo, Carl's deathbed video, Mark's Adam's apple bobbed. He admitted to changing the inheritance ratio. His phone screen lit up. A screenshot from Sophia showed the Swiss account balance down by 5 million euros. Thomas suddenly laughed, harsh and hollow in the empty hallway. "So that money you transferred," he pried open Mark's trembling fingers. "You were buying time?" The air vent hummed. Mark's tie clips suddenly snapped open, malachite shards splattering onto Thomas's shoe tips. "I was there the night he amended the will," Mark said, his voice like rusted gears. He said, "Marcus deserves to know the truth." A sudden cramp seized Lena's stomach. She thought of the blacked-out name on the genetic report and the photo on page 88 of butterflies along the Rhine. "You had the paternity test done," she said, holding her aching belly. "After his first heart attack." The bailiff's footsteps approached. Mark grabbed Thomas's shoulders, his breath reeking of peppermint. "Sophia has more than just the journal. She has the recording of Carl admitting to forging the adoption papers on his deathbed." His nails dug into the suit fabric. "What she wants is control of the Schneider Group." Thomas stared at the bulging vein on Mark's temple, identical to his father's when agitated. He remembered the night he was 7. Carl had carried a soaking wet Mark into the living room, while the shredder in the study hummed like it was dying. "The welfare home fire wasn't an accident," Lena said. She felt the hard object in Mark's suit inner pocket, the ultrasound photo crinkling under her fingertips. "You burned your own birth certificate." Mark's glasses chain suddenly snapped. As the lenses hit the floor, Thomas saw a brown ring around the edge of his iris, identical to the one in the photo from Carl's funeral. "Why didn't you say this earlier?" Thomas's voice sounded like sandpaper. Carl promised. Mark's cufflink tore the lining of his pocket, and a Swiss bank statement fluttered to the floor. "When I turned 30, his phone suddenly vibrated. Sophia's text lit up the screen, a surprise under the butterfly specimen. Lena froze mid-bend while picking up the bank statement. On the transfer record dated November 9th, 1991, a fountain pen-drawn baby footprint was visible, overlapping with the outline on the ultrasound screen that morning. The bailiff's walkie-talkie crackled with static. Mark pressed Thomas's hand to his own chest. An irregular tremor pulsed through his shirt. "She's pregnant," he stared at Lena's pale face. Twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. The world suddenly tilted for Thomas. He remembered Mark's unusual questions about the prenatal check that morning, just like the tense jawline Carl had worn when he learned Lena was pregnant. "The hearing's resuming," the bailiff said, pushing open the security door. Mark shoved a key into Thomas's hand, still sticky with Carl's signature sealing wax. "The old house's basement," he said, his breath tasting of blood. "The real will is hidden in the shredder." The hallway lights suddenly flipped on. Lena saw suture marks on the back of Mark's neck, matching the wound description in Carl's autopsy report exactly. Her phone vibrated. On the screen was a photo Sophia had sent, a 1991 welfare home registration form, where the father's occupation field clearly read banker. the ink identical to Carl's signature samples. Thomas stared at the key in his hand, the sealing wax residue growing colder by the second. "We need to go to the old house," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the hallway vents. Before the hearing restarts, Lena slipped the phone into her lab coat pocket, the ultrasound photo in her medical bag pressing against her palm. "What if Mark was lying about the shredder?" she asked, glancing toward the courtroom doors. Faint voices of the bailiffs drifted over. Thomas ran his thumb along the key's notches, the red wax flaking off onto his sleeve. "He wasn't," he said. "The way he talked about Dad's will, he's scared of what's in that basement." As they hurried toward the elevator, Lena's mind raced back to the malachite brooch in Carl's study. How its color matched the shards on Mark's tie clip, how Sophia's bracelet had glinted the same way. "The radiation lie," she said suddenly, slowing her steps. "Sophia mentioned malachite being radioactive. Do you think that's true?" Thomas pressed the elevator button hard, the metal clicking under his finger. "I don't know," he said, "but Dad spent years collecting those stones. If there was a risk, he would have gotten rid of them." He thought of the locked display case in the study, the velvet lining frayed with age. The elevator dinged, its doors sliding open with a soft hiss. Inside, the mirror reflected their tense faces, Thomas's jaw tight, Lena's hand hovering over her belly. As the doors closed, Lena pulled out the ultrasound photo from 1993, the edges now worn from being folded and unfolded. "Look at the date," she said, pointing to the faint stamp in the corner. "November 9th, 1991, the same day the Berlin Wall fell 2 years prior." She traced the blurry fetal outline with her fingertip. Dad must have known about Sophia's mother back then. Thomas leaned against the elevator wall, his eyes closed for a second. "He kept so many secrets," he said. "Why didn't he just tell us? About Mark, about Sophia, about all of it." The elevator jolted slightly as it reached the ground floor. The doors opened to the courthouse lobby, where a few reporters lingered, scribbling notes. Lena tucked the photo back into her bag, pulling her lab coat tighter around her. "We need to be careful," she said. "If Sophia finds out we're going to the old house." Thomas grabbed her hand, his grip firm. "She won't," he said. "Mark's keeping her busy with the hearing. This is our chance." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the sidewalks glistening. Thomas hailed a taxi, and as they climbed in, Lena noticed the driver's rearview mirror catching the reflection of a black car, its windows tinted, following them at a distance. "Someone's tailing us," she whispered, nudging Thomas's arm. Thomas glanced back, his jaw tightening. "It's probably Sophia's people," he said, "or Mark's. He's not going to let us get to that shredder easily." The taxi turned onto the street leading to the old neighborhood, where Carl's house stood surrounded by overgrown hedges. As they pulled up to the gate, Thomas fumbled with the key, his hands still shaking. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside, the sound of their shoes crunching on the gravel driveway echoing in the quiet. The basement door was hidden behind a stack of old moving boxes labeled Christmas decorations, 1995. Thomas pulled them aside, the dust making him cough. He inserted the key into the lock, turning it with a loud click. The basement was dark, the only light filtering in through a small window high on the wall. Lena pulled out her phone's flashlight, its beams slicing through the darkness. In the corner, a rusted shredder rested on a wooden table. It's been crammed full of shredded paper. "There it is," Thomas said, stepping toward it. He knelt down to examine the shredder. Its plug was still inserted into the wall, and the power switch was flipped to off. Lena directed the flashlight at the bin, where pieces of shredded paper glinted faintly. "Do you think the will is in there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas flipped the power switch, and the shredder whirred to life for a second before sputtering out. He frowned, then opened the bin. Underneath the top layer of shredded paper, he spotted a corner of yellowed paper that hadn't been shredded yet. He carefully pulled it out, his fingers brushing the rough texture. It was a page from the will, page 7, the one that had been missing. Lena leaned in, the flashlight beam illuminating the words. "I hereby bequeath my entire malachite collection to my children, Thomas Schneider, Marcus Schneider, and Sophia Weiss, her breath caught. Marcus, she said. Mark's real name is Marcus. Thomas stared at the page, his eyes stinging. Dad knew, he said. He always knew. He just couldn't say it out loud. Behind them, the basement door creaked open. They spun around, the flashlight beam landing on Mark's face, his glasses askew, his tie hanging loose. You found it, he said, his voice hollow. The real will. Thomas stood up, clutching the page. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Why let this go on for so long? Mark stepped into the light, his shoulders slumping. Dad made me promise, he said. Promise not to tell anyone until he was gone. He was scared. Scared the family name would be ruined. Scared you'd hate him. Lena looked at Mark, at the birthmark on his neck, at the way he held his hands just like Carl. The welfare home fire, she said. You did it to destroy the records. Mark nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I was a kid, he said. Dad told me it was the only way. He said if anyone found out about me, about Sophia, we'd lose everything. The flashlight flickered, its beam dimming. Outside, the rain started again, tapping against the window. Thomas folded the will page carefully, slipping it into his pocket. We're not going to lose anything, he said, stepping toward Mark. We're family. All of us. Mark looked up, his lower lip trembling. Sophia won't stop, he said. She wants the company, the collection, everything. She blames Dad for her mother's death. Lena thought of the ultrasound photo in her bag, of the 2 heartbeats inside her. We can fix this, she said. Together. The will proves we're all heirs. We can give her what she's owed, but she can't take over the company. Mark nodded, wiping his eyes. I have the Swiss bank account details, he said. Dad gave them to me before he died. The money's for all of us, for the twins, too. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder, the way Mark had done at the funeral. Let's go back to the hearing, he said. Let's tell the truth. Dad'll want that. They walked up the basement stairs, the shredder still humming softly in the dark. Outside, the black car was gone, the rain clearing to reveal a faint rainbow in the distance. Lena touched her belly, feeling a small kick, 2 kicks, one after the other. Everything's going to be okay, she said to Thomas, to Mark, to the babies inside her. And for the first time in weeks, Thomas believed it. The secrets were out, the lies unraveled, but they were still family. And together, they could face whatever came next.